everybody. Thanks for joining me for I'm from 60 with Ada. I just was about to flood there. What I'm reading, or what I just read, is the book Dear Vaccine. And here's the website, because it's really interesting, because it's a poetry collection sourced from this website, edited by Naomi Shihab Nye and a couple other guys. And as they say here, it is a global community poem for their voices to promote COVID-19 vaccination through the imaginative language of poetry. And hello!
Hello.
How are you? This is a very formal look that I've not seen from you before. I think you are usually wearing a hat. I don't know if I've seen your hair. This is it's exciting. I'm excited to see you in a different context. One of the things I enjoy about this is seeing people that I see in a different context here, because I've never heard you share poetry before either, even though you are a poet.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Allison. Thank you for having me and for doing this series. It's been such a joy to follow along and get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I appreciate you following along and participating. And I just read your poem because you just sent it to me. And I'm looking forward to hearing you read it. Is there anything you want to say, or do you want to talk at all? Some people don't like to read right away. Some people like to launch right into it.
I'm one of those people who generally prefers to let the poem speak for itself rather than to talk about it. So I'd love to jump in whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. Where I'm from, 2022. I'm from devalued chronic pain, lumbar, generational, gestational womb trauma, hometown drama, and migraine army claiming 1 week a month misdiagnosed patriarchy, doctor distrust, and a real deadly fear of filling out forms. From country doc, old school news reporter, one-room schoolhouse teacher, kitchen garden that has to feed a family of 8 through the winter, and a whole lot of home remedies, mouth harps, yodeling, and family bands gathering around the good word. I'm from mud-wet evergreen, tree houses and chickens, surrounded by farms surrendering to big ag, generation DDT. From pit cells, meat salad, coffee soup, nothing on brand or on cue, and clue. I'm from shunning and under construction, building the dream one field stone at a time, transplanting tiger lilies, trees and more trees, from saints painted across denominations, stained glass restoration niche. Holidays to too many funerals at Unitarian and Amish churches. I'm from that spot between Climax and Crotch Lake. Got a gal in Kalamazoo, sitting in a bath of cobalt blue. From an English cluttered with knickknacks, noun to noun, now from possession prone and loved ones incarcerated, knife skills for days. Survivors, people who know no one is self-made, from fighters and passionate pacifists, depression dancing. I'm from strictly DIY, country grammar punk as fuck. First learning how to drive a manual in the old blue truck. Sunday mornings early uncooperative clutch. Stop sign on a steep hill. Whew! From lucky dandelions scattering seeds. Medicine weeds. Wild grape jelly. I'm from got buns, hun, and honey buns. Brother raising bunnies, set 'em free. Lucid dreams and news that contrives to frighten. From can't stop watching. Nothing to lose but our change, shout out Asada, close held baggage for days. I'm from custodians of the land and outsider artists, emptying pens to draw in the margins, sculpting trash into transportation, transforming windows into altars of dancing light. Outcast at the skating rink, outer drive and outside voices playing in the woods still dark, where idle hands are the devil. I'm from Grandmother Willow, acorn soup and live oak trees. From disappearing fence rows of Osage orange, black walnut harvest, hands and candy season. I'm from 12-step traditions in a town too small for anonymity, full of relations, where we do a lot with a little, a place that's easy to miss, where people still stop in unannounced and you better offer refreshment to the elder aunties. I'm from Get In Where You Fit In, and enough for anyone who wants to grab a plate and a seat at the table.
Yay! That was wonderful.
Thank
I
you.
was so struck by your poem how the personal is political, like right off the top, obviously, but also it was so personal. Like the marriage of so many rich details, but also how they speak to a larger picture of the politics and the religion of that you grew up surrounded by and that you speak to still. And I was moved by it. So thank you. It was great.
Thanks for saying so. It's pretty
Yeah.
fresh. I just spent a week there, so it
Oh,
was
you
like
did?
nostalgia ultra mixed with all of the ways that I'm seeing it right now.
And where is it, if you don't mind my asking?
I grew up in Colon, Michigan, and my dad's
That's so
favorite joke is that if you're looking for Colon, Michigan, it's halfway between Climax and Crotch Lake because it's also like butthole. And then he'll like explain the joke to you in case you don't get it, like I did just now.
Yeah. I wondered if that joke was about the name of the town or if it was about sex or both.
Both.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Also punctuation, I guess.
Right. I hadn't even thought of that. Crotch was too distracting.
If you look at it on a map, Colon is like there's two lakes and they look like a colon.
And that's why.
Punctuation. So I think that's probably more why it's named that way.
Okay. That would make sense with our Puritan histories, that they wouldn't be making a joke about a large intestine. So.
I mean, we can wish, but no.
I know, I would wish, but yeah. So did you write this when you got back? What was your experience like writing this? And have you written other Where I'm Froms, or is this your first one? Because you're very experienced.
I'll go backwards. This is not my first Where I'm From poem. I used to teach this every year, and every year I would write a new one along with my students. But that was maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years. So it was a few years ago. And I had
before COVID. That's literally how it works now. It's like, I don't know.
It was in the before
COVID. Yeah.
I haven't been a teacher, and I haven't done that in a while, and I hadn't written or read any Where I'm From poems other than kind of watching your show for a while. So I did it in two parts. When I first talked to you about doing this, I think in July, I drew that picture, and then I listed a few things down, and I kind of put the notebook away, and then when I was in Colon this past weekend, I made a few more notes. And then when I got home last night, I sat down and wrote this.
It was very vivid. And did you feel like it was a summary of your life? Like, did you see yourself as having a point of view of an age that you are when you were experiencing or writing it? Or was it just kind of a general Ada?
I feel like there are a lot of eras that I left out of the poem. And I think when I was in Colon, my mom pulled out this photo album of like the first year, 2 years or something. So I had all those like baby pictures in my head and all of the kind of stories that she was telling about, what you were like as a baby. And then as I'm sitting on the couch writing it last night, I'm like me here right now, kind of thinking back to that time and a little bit in between. Like I guess skating rinks were probably junior high school era, but it was a little smattering.
It felt like for me as someone listening, it felt like a pretty robust picture of you, not just kind of the pinpointing a time, but and it's including who you are now with the first paragraph. And at first when I started reading it, I thought, oh, does she come from obviously there's intergenerational issues for all of us. And I was wondering, are migraines an intergenerational thing, or is that something that like has your history helped you unpack what's happening with you medically, or has it been just not helpful, or is it where you're from?
It is where I'm from. My mom suffered from horrible migraines
Mm.
for my whole life. Just in the last couple of years, she was like, well, once menopause happened, they went away. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Jesus.
But
Sorry. That's a long haul though, with like no guarantee. You know,
right?
like, oh yeah,
Um,
maybe.
maybe it could happen. But it
Yeah.
also could, I have aunts who are in their 60s and still having them. So it's pretty, and throughout my lifetime, my mom was like, at one point, her doctor thought she was having strokes. At one point, she was diagnosed as having strokes. I've been on every migraine prescription medicine
Mhm.
out there. And so that first few lines, and then I have some lumbar trauma from a bicycle accident, but my mom also has had a motorcycle accident and has some similar like body traumas from that. So I'm like carrying that. And then of course like her birthing story and the birthing story of her 7 brothers and sisters. There's some like there's all of that in there. And I think lately I've been working on all of that stuff, thinking about all of that. So it's real present.
Mm-hmm. I think it is really interesting if we have access to familial records, whether they're verbal or written, or to
Mm.
oftentimes there are these kind of connecting stories, not just in behavior or predilections, but also in like what we've been through. And that's interesting hearing about the migraines because I know like my mom when she gave birth to me, her mother was not alive and died when she was very young, and she didn't have her as a resource, and so she went
Mm.
into it blind, um, and I didn't. And I remember feeling so struck by that when I was in labor that I had at least her story with me, uh, to know that I wasn't alone, and that when you don't have those stories, you do feel more isolated, I think. So
That's really powerful. And I like how you included the oral along with the written as a record.
yeah, because that's definitely how I received all of my stories. Um, and I think there is definitely it was interesting too, the outsider art part of it. I think for most everyone that's shared their stories with me and my family, they would never think they were important enough to write down.
Mm. I I'm very lucky in that way. My mom's been an artist her whole life, but she didn't graduate from high school until she was in her 20s and didn't go to college. But she started doing stained glass as a hobby when she was paralyzed from the waist down, and so I have
Jesus.
very and then it turned into a career, and she and my dad had a very successful stained glass restoration business for 25 years,
Oh wow.
maybe more than 25 years. But I have a really just lucky history of self-taught artists who really lean into that, uh, and I'm so grateful for it and aren't afraid to take the self-taught art and make it a career or just follow it wherever it goes.
It's very empowering to know that it's yours, that we all are art. I was just having this conversation with a friend yesterday. I'm trying to now remember who it was, but talking about gatekeeping, and that people are. I was one of these people. I didn't feel like, oh, can I call myself a writer if I don't pay all my bills with it or whatever? If I haven't published a book, whatever book gate you want to pick, and it's ridiculous. I mean, it only empowers the gatekeepers. It doesn't empower artists. And call yourself an artist. Call yourself a writer. Everybody, because
Yes,
if you're
we all
doing
are.
it, you are. Yeah, and I agree. I think we all are. We're all. I just read somebody's post on Instagram saying that our work, our lives are works of art, and I
Mm.
agree. How we
Mm-hmm.
live our lives, the choices we make, like it matters beyond just where we sleep and eat. It leaves a larger footprint, and I just I like the I like that, um, that you're you have that in your family. I think that's right. I can see that in you and in your work, that ownership, that you don't need someone to give it to you, that your ability to claim it without somebody giving it to you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. That was one of the most surprising things to me when I went back to school and got my master's degree a couple of years ago, and I was in master's class workshops with writers who were formally taught, and were like, I don't know, I don't think I'm a writer. I don't know if I can call myself a writer. And I felt so so lucky that I don't have any of that insecurity. I have known that I'm a poet since I was maybe 8 with certainty.
That word in particular, I think poet is one. Because, I mean, if you've watched very many of these, many people will say, oh, well, I'm not a poet. It's like one of the first things they'll say before they read their poem. As if I'm some kind of judge and jury that's like at the end, well, you are now a poet. Or you are not, like, as if I care. I mean, please read your poem. I've got no opinion. I'm not deciding that. But I have the same hang up with the word. So I get it. Like, I'm throwing no shade at those people. I have all the same hang-ups with the word poet because we put it in this ivory tower.
Yeah, and there's so much propaganda telling you that you have to, meet X, Y, or Z criteria or walk through this gate in order to be the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I was when I was talking to George Ella Lyon, she was saying, I think it can be destructive. Like the techniques and the structure, and yes, it's important, but what's actually important is the words and your self-expression. And sometimes you need to hear it from someone you respect to let it sink in, like that you're not telling yourself that just because you want to hear it.
That's true. And I have to say, watching your interview with her was transformative for me.
For me too.
in the years of teaching that poem, I don't know that I ever looked up a biography or put together that it was a she, that she was a she, and B, that she's like a contemporary living here in the United States today, doing this. And I think if I ever teach this poem again, I'll teach some biographical information along with it, because that blew my mind. It was so lovely to watch you two.
She's such a generous person. I was struck by her, just her whole being, because we had technical difficulties and she was so patient and lovely through it all, and not, never like, I got limited time for this. It was just like, okay, whatever you need. And I loved it when she showed all the drafts, and I could imagine how powerful that would be for a beginning writer to see that she didn't just sit down and write it, and that there's no shame in just having to revise and that is part of the process and the joy and the evolution of a piece of work.
Mm-hmm. And a beautiful reflection of how life is art. Yeah.
I let it. Yeah, it was lovely. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was such a life affirming experience for me. And she's continued to be like, she'll message me sometimes, and it's always just really sweet and kind, and surreal. It's like, oh, Instagram message. So I lost my train of thought. Anything else that you would like to share about your experience? I love that you taught it. And what age group did you teach it to?
I've taught versions of Where I'm From to kindergartners. Mm-hmm. I've taught it all the way through grade school, K through 12. And my favorite, and I've also taught iterations of this exercise, the Where I'm From poem, in both juvenile detention centers and adult medium security prisons. And my favorite iteration of teaching this poem was to a group of incarcerated women. And that, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, why was that my favorite? And I think that was my favorite iteration of teaching it, because several of these women more than a few of the women in the group said something to the effect at the end of it of, I have never before working on this poem, or never before now, thought of where I'm from and where I come from and what I am as like having intrinsic value in who I am now and being sort of powerful, and positively powerful. And that was the first time I realized in all of the teaching it, that particular source of power that comes from reflecting on where I'm from.
Yes. And also the power of asking someone to share their story. Like that you're just taking the time to say, well, tell me, where are you from? And in that question is the implication that where they're from has meaning to you, you know, as well as them. And I think that's a gift that you're giving, because speaking of gatekeeping, many people who are incarcerated were in a situation where they did not get great educational experiences, and they were sort of just shuffled through the system, and people didn't have the resources or inclination to listen or be present. So that's really powerful. I only once visited a women's prison, and for like an Al-Anon meeting, and I went and did that there, and it's not the same as doing a poem, but it was interesting having them come up to me afterwards and say, oh, I heard part of myself in your story. And I know that was meaningful because I look different than a lot of them and have a different background, and we've had different life experiences, but it doesn't mean that we don't share something, and that there isn't, everyone deserves to have their story told. Every story is important. I really believe that, and I've been saying it for such a long time, and it used to really make me sound like a Pollyanna, like people be like, all right already, you know, but
but it's true.
I think the more that we take time to, and it's related to my own story, like I really only think that I could start to believe my own story had significance through believing others' story. Like I could group myself in with everybody else, and then I could give myself space, if that makes any sense. Because that's just my inclination. So I'm also saying when everybody's story matters, mine matters. And I mean, historically, just so many stories are just pushed to the side, and for many reasons, you know, race, gender, orientation, ability, all the things, and
personal insecurity,
wealth, resources, you know, all those. So I just I think that's great that you did that, and I think I love just pausing and saying, you know, where are you from? Tell me something about yourself that's meaningful to you. So that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
That I really appreciate, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to write this poem again. Thank you so much for offering the prompt and the invitation to join you and read a poem.
I'm so glad that was your experience. I love it too when someone's like, do this thing. Like, because it cuts through the noise of, because we all, I think, are sometimes in like choice paralysis, you know? It's like, what do I do next? And sometimes it's nice to just do this.
Exactly. One concrete thing I can do. Yes.
Yeah. And then I know I'm going to be successful at it. Like, because there's nobody saying that needs to be like this or do this, you know, it is how it exists is success. So that's also, I think, a good, it's nice to accomplish things, and it's nice for those accomplishments to feel like you did it. I still I try not to care as much about, I was just talking with someone about like what my habits or addictions are, and mine have definitely been like accomplishing things and being good.
Oh, wow.
You know, and
I've never thought of that as
that's
something that could be an addiction.
That's like definitely, like I feel like I've spent much of my life trying to like I've said it now to many different people, like a dossier of accomplishments. Like, see, I'm worth it. The space I take up in the world, see, here's all the reasons that it's okay that I do this. And separating myself from that, and just like, no matter what I do, I have worth, is going, I think, going to be the challenge of my life. But I still do like it when someone says good job, and like, so I'm trying to create, so it's funny, like, in a way, I think I created this space partially because it's a space that I long for, where you show up, you are yourself, you show up with whatever you wrote, and I tell you it's wonderful, because it is.
That's incredible.
you know
That's incredible, Allison.
So that's my personal revelation for the day. And I'm so glad that, so Ada and I know each other through podcasting, and we've been in different like virtual rooms together, but we have never been in conversation with each other.
This is our first one-on-one.
Yeah. So this
live
is special
on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I appreciate you taking the time and sharing these pieces of yourself. And I will see you again in the Zoom room tomorrow.
It's my pleasure, Allison. I'll see you tomorrow, and I look forward to some more conversations.
Me too. Bye.
Bye.